Hey there guys, welcome to another video. In this video we're going to create this drop down menu using CSS hover. So how this is going to work, we've got a button here which has the text of drop down. If we hover over this, you can see it displays 3 list items for us, which we can then hover over, and you can see they also have a bit of styling on them too. And then once we move the mouse, you see they disappear again. So we're going to be doing this using just CSS. So first things first, we'll just create our skeleton HTML. We've got a style sheet that we link to, so style.css. We'll just call this drop down menu, and then inside the body we'll have a div which wraps around the button and the list items. So we'll call this drop down, and then inside of this we'll have our button. Also just give this a class of btn and say drop down, and then underneath this we'll have our items. So this will be wrapped in a div called drop items, and these are just going to be anchor tags. So we'll have item 1, duplicate that, 2, 3, save that, and then open this up with Live Server. So there's our skeleton HTML. Let's send it to the style.css now and give it some styling. So the first thing we're going to do is just remove all of the margin and the padding. Set the box size into border box. Next, we want to center all of this in the center of the page here. So we'll grab the body, and we'll set the height of the body to be 100 viewport height. Display flex, justify content to the center, and align items to the center. Save that, so that centers our content. Next, let's target the drop down div, which is wrapping around both the button and the items. So we'll say drop down. We need to give this a position of relative because we're going to be positioning the items absolute inside of here so that they can appear underneath the button when we hover over it. And then we'll also set the display to inline block. Next, let's give our button a bit of styling. So this is a class of btn. Let's just increase the font size to 2 rem. And then let's also give it a bit of padding. So that's all we're going to need. Let's style the actual items themselves. So we'll say drop down items, and we'll target the anchor tags inside of those. So we're targeting the anchor tags inside of this div here, which is drop items. So it's not actually drop down, it's just drop. And let's set the display value of these to be block, so they stack on top of each other. We'll remove the underline, so that's a none. Let's also change the color of the text to a darkish gray. So this is going to have a hex color of 374151. And then from here, let's also give it a bit of padding. So 0.5 rem on the top and bottom, and 1 rem on the left and right. Now from here, what we're going to do is position all of these items absolute, which is then going to be relative to the actual drop down div, which is housing both the items and the button. So we'll do that now. We'll say drop items. Let's give them a position of absolute. And then we want to say from the top, we want this to be 100%. From the left, we want it to be 0. We'll give this a width of 170 pixels. Let's also give it a box shadow. So this shadow will be 0 pixels on the bottom, and then 2 pixels on the right, and 5 pixel blur. And that's a bit too strong, so we'll just say RGBA. So that's a 0. Set that to 0 for the colors, and then for alpha, we'll set this to 0.1. So it's just like a light background, but then it just makes the box and the items seem a bit more clearer. And the reason we're setting the top to 100% is because it'll then sit just below the button here. If we set it to, let's say, 50%, you can see the box is now halfway between the button. So we just want this to be 100%, so that when it animates, it will animate directly below the button. And then we just need to set a few more properties now. So first we want to actually on load not show these, so we're going to set the opacity to 0, and then we want the item to come in a smooth animation. So we're going to set the translate Y negative 10 pixels, so that when we hover over them they actually start 10 pixels up from the button and then they drop down to this current position. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So transform, so translate on the y-axis, so that's a negative 10 pixels. Save that, so they're slightly pushed up. We want to hide them initially, so we'll say opacity 0. So now we can't see them, but they are still there because when we hover over it, you can see it changes the cursor. And we're going to want this animation to be smooth, so we'll set the transition all 3 seconds or 0.3 seconds. Save that. And then we want to say when we hover over this button, we want the items to appear. So we'll say drop down on hover. We want to grab the drop items. We want to set the opacity to 1. So if we save that, you see hover over it now, it shows the items. We want this to be a smooth animation, so we want to set the transform translate on the y-axis to 0. So it sits just below the button. So if we hover over this now, our animation should be working. So as you can see, when we hover over this, our items now show. But we're not completely done here, because if we actually hover below the button, you can see our items are appearing. We don't want that to happen. We want the items to show just when we're hovering over the button. So the way we fix that is we actually just set the drop items, the z-index, sorry, is we actually set the z-index of the drop items to be -1. So they're actually now a level below. And we can no longer hover just below the button and the items will appear. So that fixes that issue. But if we hover over this and then we try hover over the items, it now disappear because they're going back to z-index -1, so below everything. So to fix that, on hover, we just set the z-index to 2. And now if we hover over beneath the button, they're not appearing. If we hover on the button, the items now show. And then if we try and hover on each of one of them, the items persist, and now we're able to click on any of them. And just to finish this off, let's say drop items on the anchor tag. We'll set the hover, and we'll change the background to be like a light grey. So F3, F4, F6. Save that, so that when we hover over these, it just changes the background of the items you hover over, just to create a bit of a neater effect. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next one.